Hi everybody, this is Anne. For inspiration in this video, I had to look no further than the ceramic tiles at the hardware store. I'm sure you've all seen decorative tile designs, perhaps in kitchens or even on ceilings these days. I wanted to see if I could figure out how to make these tiny works of art. For this project, I used a flat-bottom plastic container. I cut a stiff piece of insulation foam to fit tight in the bottom. I picked up a sample tile at the hardware store and cut a craft foam sheet the same size. I'll lay the foam behind the tile as I want my tile to be thicker than a regular tile. I also picked up a bag of plaster of Paris and a bucket dedicated strictly to the plaster. I filled the bucket halfway with water, then began to pour the plaster into the water. I continued this until the mixture was so saturated that the plaster floated on the top. I was careful to work outside and wear my dust mask for this part. I used my hand to work the plaster into the water, making sure there were no lumps. The plaster was a little thicker than milk. I poured this over top of the tile and waited for it to harden. If you want specifics on how to make a plaster slab, check out the link above. 2 days later, I removed the plaster cast and I drew this design inside the tile cavity. The plaster was soft, so I used a thin carving tool to carve the lines of this design. I was surprised at how easy it was to carve and how sharp the lines remained in the plaster. I used a sharp-pointed tool to get all the plaster crumbs out of the lines. Then I turned the plaster vertically and gently brushed the remaining grit from the cavity. Here was my first experiment with this, where I carved out this hummingbird and poppies design. I couldn't wait to test these out. I wired off a slab of clay and placed it over the cavity. I pressed it in just using my palms and fingers at first. I worked the clay into the mold really well. As the clay settled into place, the excess clay started to come off along the sides. I kept pressing it down, then used my brayer to start smoothing it out. I then used my metal rib to refine the clay at the top edge of the mold and really find the edges of the tile. You probably could use a metal straight edge scraped across the top to make it nice and smooth. I used my needle tool to lightly separate the edges between the clay and the plaster all the way around. Using my thin metal rib, I inserted it along one of the edges until the metal stuck to the clay. I pulled the rib out, and the stuck clay came with it. Once I had that edge dislodged, I was able to pull it straight out. I made several tiles using the hummingbird design too. I'm just tickled with how well that design showed up. I did have to go back and tweak my carvings just a little, but not much. I let the tile set up a little, then I sandwiched it between two bats and placed a weight on top of it so it can dry flat. If you want to see a video about the best way to make a flat tile, see the link above. Once the tiles were dry, I bisque fired them to cone 04. Now on to the glazing. I'm going to try my hand at a technique called flooding. I got these squeeze bottles at the craft store and filled them with glaze thinned with just a little bit of water. I started with the smaller areas along the center of the tile and worked my way to the edges. For the black cap of the chickadee, I already had this black glaze bottle topped with a tiny nozzle. I just flooded the area between the lines that I wanted black. I then switched to the different colors just like I were working in a coloring book. The idea is for the glaze to remain inside the high relief lines. Be sure to stick around to the end where we'll show you the reveal of the high-fired tiles. Now let's do the hummingbird tile. I was surprised at how fast this process went. Of course, it helps to speed up the video. I cleaned up along the edges of the tile and the design lines. Overall, I was very pleased with the results of my first tries, and it was so fun to experiment with different colored glaze combinations on each tile. Now let's see how they came out. I couldn't help but make one more tile design with this bluebird and peony. I definitely want to make more of these. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.